Hi everyone, I'm Kat and welcome to my channel, Naturally Beautiful Girl. So today I'm bringing you a very long-awaited video. I know you guys have been wanting to see this for a while, and this is going to be where I compare a whole bunch of liquid doe foot concealers. So the concealers I'm going to be comparing today are the Fitglow Concealer, the Hand Skincare Cosmetics Concealer, the Clove Hallow Concealer, the Ilia True Skin Serum Concealer, and the new Pacifica Concealer. So we've got 5 concealers to talk about. I am going to show you demos of applying them, and that way you can see what they all look like applied. I really use these under my eyes. I have acne, and I either use the PYT Beauty Concealer or the Hint Beauty Duet Concealer to conceal acne. I find that those are just much better at covering acne than any of these liquid concealers. I've never been a big fan of liquid concealers for concealing acne. That's just what works for me, so I'm really gonna focus on using these under the eyes to even the playing field. I use the same eye cream, I'm gonna call it an eye cream, but it was the Ilia Eye Serum, Eye Awake Eye Serum under all these concealers. That way I have the same base, so we're working with the same thing. I also set all of them using my 14E setting powder, and I didn't bake it, I just dusted it on. So that way we're really comparing apples to apples in terms of these concealers. And I do have a couple of points I'm gonna be comparing them on. First off, I'm gonna be comparing shades because I am super fair, if you guys can't tell, and I have a porcelain skin tone. I am often, there's like a couple of notable examples, but I'm often the lightest shade in a foundation, and sometimes that lightest shade isn't even light enough for me. So I have super fair skin, and so I'm using the lightest shade in all these concealers, and I have different things to say about the shades of the concealers. So if you're super fair, have porcelain skin tone, I can give you some thoughts on what concealers are best based off of just shades alone. I'm also going to be comparing coverage and the consistency of the concealer, as well as how they wear throughout the day and just like how I think they look in general. So we've got a lot to go through, so I'm just gonna dive right in. The first concealer I'm going to talk about is the one I am wearing currently, and this one is the Ilia True Skin Serum Concealer, and I have the shade Chicory, which is SC1, and this is the lightest shade. And I'm going to do swatches of all these concealers so we can see them all next to each other. This right here is what the lightest shade of the concealer looks like, and that is where the problem starts with this concealer. The problem is that if you are super fair, the lightest shade of this concealer is just not light enough. And I do know that Ilia is going to be expanding their shade range in their concealer. I don't know when that's going to happen, and I don't know what shades that's going to include. Ilia has told me that they will be expanding it. If you're super fair and with what I tell you about this concealer makes you want to run out and try it, my recommendation is to hold off until they expand their shade range and see if they come out with a better shade, because right now the shade is not great. I do have it under my eyes, and some days it looks better than others, but in general it's just not a light enough shade to actually brighten under my eyes. And that's part of having a good under eye concealer, is having a shade that's actually brightening. And I'm not one of those conventional beauty YouTubers that uses a shade like 3 shades lighter than their skin tone, because I can't even buy that in Nontoxic Beauty because I am so fair. But what I mean is that you do want a shade that's a little bit lighter so that it just brings a little bit of light under your eyes and really helps to counteract those dark circles. Because part of being super fair, for me at least, is that any sort of discoloration on my skin shows up really easily. Like when I get a bruise, it looks really gnarly. So when I have under eye circles, they're really dark. So having a shade that's a little bit lighter really helps to brighten under the eyes. So this concealer is super lightweight. Like, it is one of the most lightweight concealers that I have tried, and it's very interesting in consistency. It's not a full coverage concealer. I would say it's more of like a medium-ish coverage. Like, you can definitely still see my dark circles when I'm using this concealer, and I do think though that having a lighter shade may help with that, like at least give the optical illusion that it's brighter, but it's not covering everything. One of the most interesting things about this concealer is it sets pretty quickly. Like, it starts drying down and setting itself, but it's not drying. It's very interesting. It definitely starts drying down, but it doesn't start looking dry under my eyes. And I do have oily skin, but Concealers can look dry under my eyes, so I need something that's gonna stay put but doesn't look too dry. And so overall, what I have to say about this formula is the formula is one of my favorites out of all these concealers. I think the formula is pretty spot on, but the reason why this isn't like my #1 favorite concealer is the shade, because it's just not the right shade for me and there's nothing I can do to change that. I do find this concealer to be a little bit buildable, so if you do want to add a little bit more coverage, you can do that. Sometimes when you try and build up concealers, it starts getting kind of weird and it picks up itself and all of that. This concealer does lay really nicely and build really nicely on top of itself. So like what I'll normally do is kind of blend some out under my eyes, and then I'll normally go back and apply a little bit like right where my dark circles are the darkest, which is close into my nose. And I can do that and just build a little bit more coverage in that area. With it being a little bit self-setting, I have to use very minimal setting powder to actually set it. I do find that as it's drying down, it will start creasing a little bit, but if you keep kind of patting it out as it's drying down, you can get it to dry down without it really creasing. And then if you just dust a little bit of setting powder, you're good to go. It really does not require much setting powder. And once it's in place, it stays pretty well. Every concealer I use will eventually crease on me throughout the day, but this one is very minimal in its creasing. And overall, like, it is one of my favorite formulas out of all these concealers. It's just the shade that is causing it to lose some points. The next concealer I'm going to be talking about is this one from Pacifica, and this is their liquid cover full coverage lasting concealer, and I have the shade 20NF, which is the lightest shade of this one as well. Pacifica is nice because it is more accessible. They are carrying this concealer at Target and Ulta. So here it is swatched under the Ilia concealer. As you can see, it's a little bit pinker in tone. It's not as yellow as the Ilia. So even though this concealer is a little bit dark for me as well, I find that the shade of it, I can get it to work better under my eyes. Whereas you see how yellow the Ilia is? That more of a pink tone works well. It kind of acts a little bit more as a color corrector in the Pacifica and helps me to actually conceal my dark circles. So even though it is a little bit deep, I find personally on my skin tone that the Pacifica shade is more flattering and easier for me to work with. Once again, needs a lighter shade still. It's still not light enough for fair skin. Pacifica and Ilia both have foundations that kind of go with these concealers. Pacifica has the light foundation, Ilia has the True Skin Serum foundation, and both of those foundations come in foundation shades that are appropriate for my skin tone. Like, I can actually get really good shade matches with those two foundations, but then their corresponding concealers don't have a good shade match. So that's kind of why on those two brands I'm a little tough. I'm like, come on guys, you made foundations that actually work for fair people, make the concealers too. But I really do like the Pacifica concealer. The Pacifica and Ilia concealers are very similar to me in terms of consistency. They're both really lightweight, and the Pacifica, like the Ilia, does start to self-set some. And I can also build up the Pacifica in areas where I need more coverage, and it does build on itself well. The Pacifica concealer does have more coverage than the Ilia concealer. It does say it's full coverage. I'm not entirely sure it's like full coverage in that it's not like a Tarte Shape Tape concealer. It is one of the most full coverage out of the ones here. So if you really are looking for something to really conceal dark circles, I like this one. I have different things I like about different concealers. If I really want full coverage and I don't want to worry about my concealer creasing or anything like that, I have been reaching for the Pacifica. I do wish it was more brightening, so if I really want something super brightening, I reach for a different concealer that I'll be talking about in a few minutes, but this one has been one of my most reached for concealers, and even though, like I said, the shade is a little dark for me, having the pinker undertones in it makes it easier for me to work with than the Ilia concealer. So I really like this one. I do recommend this one. I think the shade is a little bit better if you have really fair skin and you're trying to find a concealer that works for you. And I do think it has more full coverage than the Ilia, but if you are into lighter makeup and want to wear less full coverage makeup, but you definitely want to conceal dark circles, the Ilia is good. But if you really want to like conceal, then the Pacifica is really good. But I do like how it wears on me. I like how it dries down. I like that it's lightweight. Both of those concealers are really great, and they have the cat stamp of approval with the note that the shades for fair skin are not great. So I'm gonna move on to my next concealer here, and this is the Clove Hallow Concealer, and I have the shade 01, which is the lightest shade of this concealer. And I have a bit of a story about this concealer. I reviewed this a while ago, like right after it first came out. And I didn't like the concealer and I actually decluttered it. And so you're probably wondering, Kat, why do you still have this concealer? Well, I did declutter it and I gave it to another one of my friends who is fair skinned, but she is like one shade darker than I am. And so I gave her this concealer thinking, okay, maybe it'll work for her, because I wasn't in love with the shade of it. And I placed an order with Clove Hallow to actually pick up their powder foundation, and there was a mishap with the order and they accidentally sent me the concealer instead of the powder foundation. We got it all straightened out. I got the powder foundation, but they told me to just keep the concealer, which I appreciate because, long story, I really hate when companies send you the wrong thing and then make you try and return it. That's just, they made the mistake and then you're running around trying to deal with the situation. Long story short though, so it came back into my life and I was like, maybe this is meant to be that I give it a second chance. So I decided to give it a second chance. I think you're gonna see what I keep saying about all these concealers is the shades are just not that great. Okay, so the third shade down is the Clove Hallow Concealer. And as you can see, it's really pink. So I can't really use this on acne spots on my face or anything like this. I basically use this as like a color correcting concealer. And I know a lot of people really like this Clove Hallow Concealer, but my problem is the shade. Clove Hallow, please, please fix the shade of this concealer. Like, it is pink. I'm not really sure who has that skin tone. Like, it's pink. If you're pink, that's cool. Pink's a lovely color, but most skin tones are not that pink. That's my first problem with this. The second problem I had with it is it dries down like the Pacifica and like the Ilia, but it's somehow drying. And the Pacifica and Ilia both dry down. You minimally need to set them, but they don't look dry under your eyes. This one looks dry, and I have oily skin and it still looks dry. And this one does have a lot of coverage. It is a pretty full coverage concealer. I would put it on par with like the Pacifica concealer in terms of coverage, but I don't have a good time with this concealer. And my problem with the concealer is some days it'll look okay under my eyes and I'll be like, oh, we're back on good terms. I figured this out. We're good. Like, I'm gonna use you now. But then the next day I will do the same thing. I'll put the same eye cream under my eyes. I'll put the concealer on and I'll set it with my 14E setting powder and it will look creepy. It'll look patchy. It just doesn't look good. And I have no idea what I did differently between the 2 days. The Ilia and the Pacifica and all the other concealers, like, I know when I use it, I'm gonna have the same result every day. This one is very hit or miss for me, and that overall makes me not want to use it. So overall with this concealer, the shade is not good. It can look very dry under my eyes. The coverage is good, but it's not really reliable. Like, I don't know from day to day how it's actually going to look. And when you're applying your makeup, you want to know, when I put my foundation on, this is gonna be how it's gonna go, and I know how it's gonna look throughout the day. Whereas with this, I'm like, is today gonna be a good day with it? And I don't really want that. And I am an affiliate for Clove Hallow, and that's what I wanna say is, like, I am an affiliate for the brand, but I'm not afraid to tell you that this is just not good. If there were to be an improvement, they definitely need to come out with another shade of this concealer in the fair range that has more neutral undertones and is lighter so that it's actually brightening. That would help it some, but also I just think the formula is just not good. I think the other concealers are better. And for instance, the Pacifica concealer is around the same price as the Clove Hallow, and I much prefer the way the Pacifica concealer looks on me compared to this one. The Hand Skincare Cosmetics is also similar in price to this one, and I prefer the Hand Skincare as well. So moving on to the Hand Skincare Cosmetics. I got this in a Petit Word box, and this is a shade Fair. It's Hand Skincare Cosmetics still has a pretty limited shade range in general. They did expand it some. It could use some more expansion, but they at least expanded down so that now they have fair shades. At first, when it first launched, they didn't, which is why I never tried it out. But now there's a fair shade. I am trying it out, using it, and overall liking it. So the fourth shade down now is the Hand Skincare Cosmetics, and as you can see, we're finally getting to a shade that's actually close to my skin tone. Yay! So I don't know what the other 3 shades are, but this one is actually close to my skin tone. It is still a little bit of a pink concealer shade. It's got a little bit of a pink undertone. You can use pink to kind of brighten under the eyes. So this one actually does work very well for me shade-wise. It is a little bit thicker in consistency than the other 3 I mentioned, and it doesn't really dry down as much. You definitely need to set it with some setting powder, and it's gonna take more setting powder than the previous 3 concealers I talked about. The coverage is pretty good. I think it's a step down from the Pacifica concealer and the Clove Hallow in terms of coverage. I would say it's closer to like a light medium finish. But because the shade is really good, it really does a lot for concealing under my eyes because I'm actually brightening under my eyes. So even though it's not physically covering as much, it's brightening. That helps to counteract the lesser coverage that it has. I really like this one. This is definitely one of my favorites out of the bunch because it is a good shade for me. It is affordable as well. It's vegan and cruelty-free. This is definitely really high on my list out of favorites out of these because it's affordable. It's a lot more affordable than the Fitglow concealer. The shade is good for me, which you can see my struggle. Like, this is my struggle, and if you have fair skin, this is also your struggle. So I really like the shade of it. It does tend to crease on me throughout the day because it's not as self-setting as the other concealers. It will crease on me as I'm wearing it. What I normally do throughout the day is I will just take my finger and kind of dab it out, and I can like dab out the creases, but it is something that like midday when I'm using the bathroom, I'm gonna have to actually go ahead and do that. Whereas with like the Ilia, the Pacifica, I won't have to do that. The Clove Hallow will just look weird and maybe irreparable by that point because it decides to do that day whatever it decides to do. It's not something I can't work with, and it doesn't look dry or creepy or super heavy under my eyes. So this one is definitely one I would really recommend checking out. There's a reason why I keep talking about it in favorites videos and I keep mentioning it over and over and over again because it's really good. And the final concealer is the Fitglow Beauty Concealer. This is my second tube of this, and when I first tried it out, I kind of gave it a negative review. I then came to like it more, and then now that I've tried more of these concealers, I'm now circling back to being not quite as positive about it. That's something to keep in mind, is that your thoughts on products do evolve with time. They do evolve with like the more you test it out, the more you wear things. You might like them more, you might like them less. With this one, I came to understand how to use the product better, so that made me like it more. But then a lot of these concealers have been released since then. For instance, Pacifica has been released. The Ilia has been released. I have now tried out the hand skincare cosmetics. And so I've found other concealers that are about half the price of this one that I like. And so then it's made me a little bit less positive about this one. So the thing that I have to give kudos to with the Fitglow concealer is the shade. So I have the shade here in C1, which is the lightest shade of the concealer. And as you can see on my arm, out of all 5 of these concealers, it is the lightest and closest to my skin tone. That's a huge reason why this concealer is important if you're fair. It has a little bit of pinkiness to it, but it's a lot less pink than the Clove Hallow concealer, which is kind of huge. And I really like it because it's actually brightening under my eyes because it is the appropriate shade for me. It's actually a little light. My skin on my arms is a little bit lighter than the skin on my face. So it is a little bit brightening under my eyes, which I really like. It's very similar to me with the hand skincare cosmetics in terms of consistency, in terms of thickness, in terms of not drying down as much, in terms of, you know, needing quite a bit of powder to set it. Like, those are the main drawbacks with the Fitglow concealer, is that it is a little bit heavier. It is more prone to creasing than some of the ones that are more self-setting. It's quite brightening. It's also quite full coverage. So the hand skincare and the Fitglow are quite similar in terms of coverage and in terms of formula. The bad thing is the Fitglow is about twice the price of the hand skincare cosmetics. So I've heard Reagan talk about the hand skincare cosmetics being a bit of a dupe for the Fitglow concealer, and I completely agree with her. I mean, obviously there's a difference in ingredients. Fitglow is very, very centered around their ingredients. I mean, hand skincare cosmetics is too. In terms of the end product and how things look on you, at the end of the day, they're very similar. The difference for me is that the Fitglow is more brightening because it is a lighter shade. Like the Fitglow is the lightest shade of concealer that I have found in Non-Toxic Beauty. If you are very fair, very porcelain skin toned, and you are struggling to find a concealer that will work for you, this one will work. So out of all the concealers, this is my favorite shade. So if I could take this shade, I would make it into the Ilia formula, the Pacifica formula, and the Hand Skincare Cosmetics formula, and then those would be the 3 concealers that I would own. And I would get rid of the Clove Hallow, and I would get rid of the Fitglow. Unfortunately, those 3 concealers don't come in that shade. So this one is one that I will probably always have, because if I really need something brightening, this is the only guy that can truly do the job for me. The Hand Skincare Cosmetics concealer comes really close, but if I look in the mirror and I'm like, whoa, my dark circles are really, really bad today, this is gonna be the only one that's gonna, you know, do the job for me. Also, as a note, I do find that the Hand Skincare Cosmetics is a little bit less creasy than the Fitglow. The Fitglow has always been very creasy on me, which is really funny because it markets itself as a not creasing concealer. And yes, I've tried applying less of it. Yes, I've tried blending it out with a sponge. Yes, I've tried blending it out with my finger. Yes, I've tried baking it. Yes, I've tried setting it. I've tried like every combination of ways to not make that concealer crease. It creases on me. So it is definitely not a creaseless concealer. I have to say, if I had to rank my concealers in terms of favorites, it would be probably the Hand Skincare Cosmetics concealer first. Tied for second would be the Pacifica and the Fitglow. Fitglow is a better color, but Pacifica is full coverage and sets better than the Fitglow. Third would be the Ilia. I love the formula. The shade is just really not a good shade for me. And then in 4th place would be the Clove Hallow, because I don't like the shade of the Clove Hallow, but I also don't like how it looks on me either. So I hope you guys found this helpful. If you have any further questions, please leave those for me in the comment section down below. And if you'd like to see more non-toxic beauty content, be sure to check out my Instagram at naturallybeautifulgirl. I'm going to be posting a picture of the swatches on there to help you guys if you are fair skinned and shopping for a concealer. Hopefully this will help you out. Also be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!